We were Where Angels Fear to Tread, a novel by E.M Forster, published in 1905, a fictional novel. So, Where Angels Fear to Tread is a 1905 novel by British writer E.M Forster, best known for his later novels A Room with a View, published in 1908, and A Passage to India in 1924. Where Angels Fear to Tread covers similar thematic territory to those novels concerning a young woman, Lelia Harrington, who attempts to escape the snobbery and repression of her life in Edwardian England through a passionate affair with an Italian man from a lower class background, Gino Cerilla. Lilia's story ends unhappily as she realizes that Gino has married her for her money and that she can never be reintegrated into middle class English life. After her death, her Italian and English families fight for custody of her son by Gino. The novel's title is taken from a line in Alexander Pope's 1711 essay on criticisms for fools rush in where angels fear to tread. The novel opens as a young widow, Lelia arrives at the train station in Swanston, England. Lelia has been living with family of her late husband, Mrs. Harrington, and her surviving children, Philip and Harriet. However, Mrs. Harrington, regarding Lelia as vulgar and unsophisticated, despair of the way Lelia is raising her daughter, Irma. Worst of all, she has discovered that Lelia is growing close to a lower class man. Although Mrs. Harrington is a snob, it is clear that Swanston's society shares her prejudices. Foster make it clear that Swanston is a place where hypocrisy and repression rule and where people are more concerned with maintaining appearances than anything else. To avoid disgrace in the eyes of her neighbors, Mrs. Harrington has decided to send Lelia to Italy. In Italy, Mrs. Harrington hopes Lelia will not only be separated from her would-be lover, she might also acquire some culture. Meanwhile, the Harringtons while keep Irma with them and raise her properly in Lilia's absence to keep Lilia from getting into trouble. Mrs. Harrington has appointed a chaperone, Miss Caroline Abbott, who is younger than Lilia, but in Harrington's opinion trustworthy. Lilia is more than happy to comply with this plan. She feels oppressed by the atmosphere of Swanston and the difficulties of raising her daughter. She feels liberated when she arrives in the Italian town of Monteriano, where one really does feel in the heart of things. And off the beaten track, Lilia is entranced by the passion of the Italian villagers and their lusty, unrestrained attitude of life. However, Foster allows us to glimpse something that Lilia cannot see herself. The Italians' romantic and familial customs are also very different to those of Swanston, and Lilia may be a little out of her depth. Lilia falls for a local man, Gino, Cerilla. He is extremely handsome and charming, but the reader can see that he is also selfish and self absorbed. Mrs. Harriton learns from Lilia's mother that Lilia has married an Italian nobleman, suspecting that the truth is otherwise. She dispatches her son Philip to find out. Philip hears the full story from the Caroline. Ginu, the son of a local dentist from the Harriton's perspective, is little better than a peasant. Appalled, Philip takes Lilia back to England. The Harritons will have nothing further to do with the disgraced Lilia, but they keep Irma with them since she still bears the Harriton name and cannot be allowed to disgrace it. Lilia, pregnant with Gino's son, dies in childbirth. The Harritons and Gino fight over custody, and Mrs. Harriton sends Philip and Harriet to Italy to reclaim Lilia's son. They meet up with Caroline and explain their mission. Caroline agrees to help, but privately she is concerned, believing correctly that Mrs. Harriton is concerned only about her family's reputation and not about the welfare of the child. Philip and Harriet attempts to persuade Ginu to part with his son. Caroline provides ambivalent help, finally realizing that nothing will persuade Ginu. Harriet kidnaps the baby and makes a hasty escape by carriage, but the carriage overturns on a steep road and the baby dies. Furious and grief stricken, Gino confronts Philip, who is overcome with remorse, having played with both sides throughout. The Caroline steps in to keep the peace. Caroline and Philip return to England. Philip has fallen in love with Caroline and is planning to declare his love during the journey. But before he can do so, Caroline admits that she has developed feeling for Gino. Where angels fear to tread, explore theme of reference, prejudice, and the tension between family and romantic ties. Forster's first novel, it established his reputation as a major new voice in British fiction. In 1991, the novel was adapted into a film of the same name starring Rupert Graves and Helen Mirren. It has also been staged as an opera, which received its first professional performance in 2015 and Opera San Jose. So this is the story of the novel Where Angels Fears to Tread by E.M Forster. I hope you will enjoy it. Thank you.